afternoon. The May 24th, 2022 board work session is now in order. Tammy, roll call, please.
Ms. Belford?
Present.
Ms. Campbell?
Present.
Ms. Jenkins?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, during this afternoon's work session, we'll be reviewing 5 policies for board discussion and or suggested revisions, and we'll receive a parent survey update. There are no public comments at today's meeting. The public will have the opportunity to speak on the policy items at the June 14th work session when they are brought forward for rule development and public hearing. We will now begin with board policy 3315, student and staff wellness. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy and or make suggestions for revision? Right. The next is our board policy 5121, controlled open enrollment. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy and or make suggestions for revisions? Ms. Campbell?
All right. Oh, Ms. Klein. Hello. First off, let me turn my microphone on. First off, thank you for the changes. These were some of them were kind of extensive. Some of them were just moving things around. I think these are good changes, particularly a conversation you and I had about allowing the people on the wait list to fill those spots. I think that will be a good thing. There was one little technical change, and then another suggestion I want to make. So down in the new section 3, G6, the very last part of Roman numeral 3, it's I think it's just a language cleanup. It needs to be. It says under Florida statute 1002.31 and therefore may not displace. I think something got left out there. You see that? Okay. And then we had talked about, last time we revised this policy, we did a major revision of this policy. What would we do with people who were new to Brevard? In other words, they moved into Brevard in the middle of the school year. Could they do some kind of EPO, ELO option in the middle of the school year? And we have that for military families. They can come in at any time and come into any school, any program. But if someone is truly new to Brevard and a school has room, we're not losing them from another school necessarily. Could we leave it open? And the resulting decision was that we would allow that if there was room and there wasn't a wait list, we would allow that. But it never made it into the policy, and I think you helped me find it. It's actually in procedures, kind of a Q&A. But I wondered if it would be beneficial to actually put it in the policy since we have all these, because you really have to dig around the open enrollment website to find that. And I'm sure it sounds like we're following it, but if someone's new to Brevard, usually the first thing they're going to come to is our school website, which is kind of a beast. And could we just add it into, we already have links off of that page to this policy. Could we add it into policy rather than just in a document that you kind of have to search to find? I don't know if the rest of the board is interested in that, but that's all I have for this one. And so basically it would be leaving what we already have in practice and we already have written in procedures. It would basically say if someone comes in and they're new to Brevard, that they can apply to any school that does not have a wait list and get in as an EPO or an ELO. I think it'll be particularly helpful if, for example, a secondary student is already in a program wherever they came from, and then they can get right, but maybe the school where they're zoned for doesn't have that program. They can go on, I don't know how often it would be used, but I think it would be good to have it written down in policy.
Fine. Do you have any concerns with that request? Okay. Any other board members have any comments or questions on that particular policy? Okay. Next then is board policy 7110, student accommodation. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy and or make suggestions for revision? All right, then we will move on to Board Policy 7250, Commemoration of School Facilities. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy and/or make a suggestion for revision? Mr. Susan?
Okay. So again, thank you staff for doing a lot of work on this. So we really have made some changes, which I think will be good for all of the community. You know, not that anyone would do this, but as the policy stood before, somebody could just come up with the idea that, hey, I want to rename, you know, Manatee Elementary, Groundhog Day Elementary, and we would have to initiate the 18 months all hands on deck resources, you know, and not to mention the fact that when we think about what's happened with the, for example, with the Mel High situation, the public is not, it was perceived as if it was coming from the board. And so there was all the extra angst that came with that. I think the 6-month time frame is excellent. I think 180 days, 6 months is enough time to have the 3 meetings, especially in today's age of digital information. We can get all the input that we need. I like the 75% threshold. You know, I like the thought that one person can make a difference, but that difference needs to be made in their influence in the community before it raises to the level of, you know, significant change like this. My one change that I would suggest is I think the 3 years is too short. If we're going to go through all the process of either naming original school, which we'll have another new school in a couple years, and all the involved, it's very clearly laid out, all the community input and student input to name a school or to rename a school or to consider renaming a school, considering the cost of branding, I think it needs to be at least 5 years. I don't know if the board would be willing to go higher, but to me, it needs to be at least 5 years. I think 3 years is too short. And then I did want to go back and look in, I don't know what Roman numeral this is. Number 3, no Roman numerals. Number 3A that lists all the percentages. I wondered if, I don't know if I have a preference either way, but it says if it's not coming from one of the committees like SAC committee or PTA, it's either 75% of the students, a number equivalent to 75% for alumni, equivalent to 7% for community. What if it's like a combination of that? You know, because we could say like number 5, community, that community could be made up of students, alumni, residents, parents. I guess if it was a combination, it would fall under number 5. So maybe my point is moot.
I would leave it fall under number 5. And I'm on board with you, Ms. Campbell, on lengthening this.
Ms. Campbell there? You had a similar
Yes,
concern.
I can. And that was the one thing I was going to bring up to Campbell. Thank you for bringing it up. I think 3 years is too short. Absolutely. I agree.
And I just picked 5. It can be
5.
longer.
Just pick a number. Mr. Susan, are you ready? Or I think Ms. Jenkins may have a comment. Ms. Jenkins? I don't think he's gotten to what he's looking for yet.
So,
Okay, so-
there's a couple of points. And then
So you know, going through this, I need some help understanding something, because we just went through an entire process of approving a policy in which we allow parents, community members, even if they don't attend the school or even have children in our school, to submit review of our curriculum and books within our libraries. We're doing it with a simple email. We could do an entire list of them, which would then enact a procedure that can take, we already said, years at some point. But then when we come to something like this, we're creating much higher thresholds. And it's just confusing for me because I feel like on one hand, we continuously say we want parent involvement, community involvement inside our schools, what's written inside our schools and inside of our curriculum and in our books, but then we seem to have a higher threshold and standard for a word that's written on the outside of a wall. I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel like I have to. It's confusing to me. I don't really understand the point behind that. The 75% doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like that's a really high threshold when we just went through this with Edgewood. I think it's something that if a community feels like it needs to be brought up, the students feel like it needs to be brought up, the parents feel like it needs to be brought up, then it should be allowed to go through a process of review and consideration, just like everything else that we've been doing. Because the only difference I can see here is who is making the submissions of these things. And so I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the 75%. Again, I don't understand the severe restriction of it from all angles.
So I hear your frustration, but the book thing that's required by law that someone, even who's not a parent, yeah, it is. It's the statute, community member, and it's defined. As far as this goes, I think that we absolutely can have community, and the Edgewood thing was a mascot, which is not covered by this policy. We're talking about the naming of a building, of a school. What this does is it moves the burden of getting the communication out there, the momentum from our staff to the community. And so if there's a need or a desire that coming from SAC, which is representative of the school community, they can, which is a smaller number of people, and there's no percentage on that. It would have to be a majority of their vote. Same thing with their PTA. It would have to be a majority of their board, right, their PTA board. Those would be ways. But it's not that it has to be that. So I thought about this number. So for like a big school like a Viera or Mill High, you're talking about 1,500 kids. For an elementary school, you're talking about a couple hundred signatures that could come. Like I said, number 5 would be all-encompassing from students, alumni, parents, teachers. You know, if someone who wants to change the name of a school that's been in place for a while, okay, or let's just pick Viera Elementary. It's our most recent school. It's a pretty generic name. Maybe somebody wants to name it after, you know, something besides just the city. You know, at that time, they'd have to have a couple hundred signatures. If they can't get enough community support to get that much, then I don't know. I think that's the community speaking. One of the things that I did when we talked about this the last time, or when we were having these conversations regarding the Mill High naming, was I looked at the name changes that were suggested in Duval County. You guys probably saw the news. They last summer renamed 6 of their high schools. They had 6 schools named after Confederate military people. And they renamed, there were originally 9 schools on the list, but they renamed the 6 Confederate schools. And they did they used their supervisor of elections and went out to the community and had a big vote and had all this data. And it was very clear. I can send you guys the link from the article. It was very clear reporting done what the community wanted as far as all 9 schools that they originally looked at. And then it was very clear with the 6 schools that were the Confederate schools, what the desire of the community was. So you know, we can change the percentage, but I think it needs to be something, because I don't think that we need to be able to have one person come up with an idea and then our whole staff and our whole system has to jump in and to do this big, long process with something that may not go anywhere. That's where I am with that.
Mr. Susan?
Good. I love the fact that it's 75%, and I'll tell you why. It crosses political and other divisions. So if you have in the community a 50-50 or 60-40 split politically, it has to go into the other group in order to get 70%. So I think that that's a huge opportunity for the most part, is that it takes away the political drive behind any of these renaming. Somebody can't come out and say, we want to do this, because you have to get both sides of political leaning on board. And the reason I reference that is it's referenced earlier inside of the document that these cannot be, right? So I think it's in line with this. Staff, I love it. I think you guys did a great job. I think it gives a vehicle for each group. I think it gives the students a vehicle. It gives the SAC a vehicle. It gives the school board a vehicle. It gives everybody one that if there's an issue, the plurality of the issue can be brought forward. I would say that in the naming process, it says, and this is something that we've had discussion about, when we name a school and it comes down, it comes to us as a recommendation, and we have the opportunity inside of here to reject or support. But there's no follow-up, right? There's no like, if the school board rejects, then what is the next step? Does it go back to them to redo? Or can the school board at that point take the proposals, the names maybe, and select from? Does that make sense? I would say that trigger right there, not that I don't know if it's ever happened in the history, but if there's a last minute thing like, who knows, the school's naming it after something and they find out something in the person's past or something at the last minute, the school board rejects it, they can, instead of having the staff go through the whole process again, take number 2. There needs to be a trigger there. I know that in cases of the Confederate renamings, there have been like a mass review of all the school names, like if you've seen that before. So not that we have, like, we've never had that need before, but where it says a max of 3, I mean, I don't know if we particularly should do that, only because in past, when they did it, I think there was a couple school boards that said, okay, we're going to review all the names, review everything, right? And then they first kicked it out. That would inhibit us from doing that, that's all. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's kind of it narrows the scope, but I mean, I like it because I don't want any of our schools renamed, but I think it's unfair if we have something that happens to go there. And then I wanted to verify, but I think Paul needs to be here, but we can all pretty much agree to it, that in the event that there's a school board renaming or something like that, the school board always has, with a majority vote, the ability to rename a school just at a meeting. They literally do. Now, we would never do that, but technically the power of the school board could just say, we as 3 members of the school board rename this facility right now. And that should be part of, you know what I mean, a part that the school board has that, or it should be inherently known that we can do that. Does that make sense?
But wouldn't we have to follow this policy since we've set this policy for
No.
ourselves?
No, like if the school board literally voted to do it, we are within our right as constitutional officers to do pretty much. Does that make sense? And the reason I say that is not because we're going to have a meeting and then just go ahead and rename something. It gives us the ability that in the fact that there's multiple renamings or namings to be able to make that choice. Does that follow? I don't think we come out and just say we're going to rename these schools. That would never happen. But in the event that there's a debate or there's something going on and it's going down the line, we have a couple and all of a sudden the first person was found out to have something done illegally or something bad in their background that nobody else knew about. Now we can just say, okay, we're going to number 2. That's all. Does that make sense to you?
So I think what I hear is, because we have, would it kick in, because we have, once it's, if we go through the renaming process, it can't be reconsidered for 3 years, or if we change it to 5-5, would that make it where we've considered it, we've rejected it, so does that mean that name can't be touched in 5 years and we can't go to the second best option?
There's just a couple of things. The ultimate power is left into the school board, right? We can at any time choose to reject our own policies, vote in a majority to overrun them just because there was something that goes on. It really doesn't even have to be put in there. I was going to ask Paul and ensure that if 3 or a majority of the school board members decide to rename a school, they can just do it. That's all. And then we can wait to get that from Paul. And then my last question is, does this become effective immediately? Because we have one renaming that's out there. So would this make that then go through this process? Or would we want to continue that one out until it's over? That is a big piece right now. I would say that this becomes effective immediately, and then we put the new guidelines onto the old, but 6 or 1 happen, you know, because we have a renaming of Jackson Middle School going through right now. We're going to have a policy in place because we felt like the process of that was not strong to do, but now are we going to allow that application to continue, or are we going to allow to start to build? That's all. Those were my points. Thank you. You guys are great. This is a great.
Madam Chair, can I please follow up? Sure. Thank you. I know Mr. Gibbs isn't here, but I feel pretty confident Mr. Gibbs would say that we would have to follow the policy that was in place when that submission was made. I feel like this was an issue that we had previously. Dr. Mullins, you look like you have something.
Yeah, we have actually conferred with Mr. Gibbs about that very detail, and he advised that we should continue the old process through that submission, and then the new policy would apply to any new submissions once it has gone through the final board approval.
So a couple of things were said that I want everyone to kind of think about for a second. So when we talk about naming a new school, ultimately that decision gets placed upon the members of the board to make that decision or not. And then if community members, parents, students feel that there is an issue with a school name, then we're placing a higher threshold upon our community that we say we want input from, and our parents that we say we want input from. Again, it just, to me, that doesn't seem balanced. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Ms. Campbell, you said something about, we can end up with one person triggering this to create more work for staff, and it ends up with a whole big process. But again, I'm going to re-say what I said at the beginning. We have that for when it comes to curriculum and book challenges right now. So again, we want community and parent input with the words that are inside of our buildings, but we don't want it for the words that are outside of our buildings. I don't believe that this is an issue that would happen as frequently as something like that. So again, I don't understand the point of it. And it's the political threshold thing. I don't even understand that, because when we look back on the things that happened when I've been sitting here, we had a mascot at Edgewood that was culturally based. That was the decision of the students. They didn't like the cultural reference behind it. Mel High seemed to be coming from a cultural group that wanted to reflect on Hispanic American heritage. And right now, with Andrew Jackson, again, it's a cultural thing. So I think when you then say, okay, that percentage helps make a balance, when we're talking about a group that might be disenfranchised or a minority who has an issue with the cultural reference of something, or wants to commemorate their group, then we're also putting them at a disadvantage to muster all of that support ahead of time as well, before they can get out there and kind of talk about why they want to do it. Ultimately, I just don't see the purpose behind creating such a high threshold for something like this, other than politics. Thank you.
I would remind you that if you look in 3A, it says the superintendent or any school board member. So if someone comes to you as a school board member and says, and has an idea, there's no threshold has to be met. A school board member can bring it to the board for consideration at any time. So, that's in there. And as far as people being able to get out there and communicate, that's going to have to happen in order ultimately for it to cross the finish line. Is they're going to have community support in the meetings, a broader support than just the 1,500, for like a big school like Mel High, or a couple of hundred. So it's, like I said, I referred to Duval County again. I mean, they had lots of community input, even used the supervisor of elections to get clear, because this is a situation. It seems so like some things would be an obvious, right? But emotions, history, all that run high. The community needs to speak clearly. In the case of Duval County, they spoke very clearly, and it did exactly what Mr. Susan mentioned a little while ago. It went across party lines. Definitely went across party lines for Duval County. And the community spoke, and they spoke clearly, and they were able to get that accomplished, which, I applaud them for doing that. I just think, that 3A allows, and even just a single person, if a single person comes to one of us and says, I want to do this, one of us can bring it before the board and say, do we start this process? Is the board willing to initiate the process? And, it's still in there.
So I hear you on that, but that alone to me makes it a potentially political process. I don't think that if it is something that's cultural and it is a minority group, for instance, again, what was going on with Mel High, they wanted to acknowledge their culture and someone in their culture. I don't think that they would have to meet the threshold of a board member being comfortable to bring that up or happy to bring that up at a board meeting. Again, these schools, they represent our communities. I think that they should have an easier say about what they're named. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, you know, I didn't grow up here, so I grew up in a different way. So we had schools that had numbers, but they also had names. And all of our schools were named after people who had passed that were from that community that did something notable. For instance, my middle school was named after a police officer that was in the force for only 2 years and had given him his life on duty. And so I don't think it's crazy to think that someone might want to bring that forward, a member of the community, to bring something like that forward and have that conversation to just add a little more value to the community and reflective of what the community is that they serve. I don't think it has to do with politics. It can literally be something like that. I don't know. It has more meaning to the community.
Like to finish and then I'll be good, or did you want to speak? I'm sorry. So I think this is perfectly put together because we had a situation where a small minority brought together a group of individuals that maybe 2 or 3 that created a massive impact in our community. In the Melbourne, I appreciate you bringing it up, Ms. Jenkins. The Melbourne High School is a perfect example of what happened. A group brought together an organization, tried to file a petition that the own organization voted against with their board. It continued and allowed to the numbers of support that were dismal at best, 1, 2 people supporting it with hundreds against. And we remember the numbers that came out, and putting the staff, the mayors, the community through that, when you had a number of individuals that were not supported by the majority, that were not supported by the people in the community, that to me was a perfect example of it. Now, issues that are brought forward by an ethnic group or another group is perfect. If there is a group inside this community that brings that forward as a legitimate argument, this gives the avenue for that to happen. But what this does is it does not allow our community-based organizations that might have 3 or 4 people to file a petition to create so much work that is not ultimately supported. I mean, the group never even reached out to the guy they were trying to name it after. So it's a perfect example to actually have this policy, and I appreciate staff making it. So.
Madam Chair, may I please say we don't even need to go into the details of it, but you know, that situation was complicated by a deaf in an organization. It was complicated by certain members of the community trying to make it a thing. That was a messy situation for many, many variables, not just because a group brought up the process. So I think that's unfair to bring that up. To be quite honest, people on this board had a problem with a mascot change prior to Mel High even being a situation. So using that as an example to me just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make me comfortable with the fact that we have a significantly higher threshold just to start the process. Maybe steps along the way, checkpoints, that would make a little more sense to me. But for the process to start, such a high threshold doesn't make sense.
So if I could speak to that, Ms. Jenkins, I understand where you're coming from on it, and I absolutely understand your concerns, but I think within the policy, there is the provision that they could simply get majority support from the school advisory council or from the PTA. And that would be enough. So you're talking, I mean, you could have a PTA membership that's 5 people, and if they get 3 of them to agree with them, then it could be brought forward. So it doesn't, I just want to make sure that it's clear that not everything is limited to that 75% of full community support to get the process started. And so I think that the point of changing the policy is to ensure that there is at least some support for the idea being brought forward. So if they go to the PTA or they go to the SAC, and every school has a SAC, even if they don't have a PTA or PTO, then those individuals would be able to bring it forward as well. So I think that gives some cushion to your concern, in that they don't have to get 1,500 people or 500 people to support it in order for it to be brought forward. And then it still has to go through all of the process and all of the feedback along the way. But I think it shows that at least there is enough support for the concept to warrant starting the entire process, as opposed to what we have seen in some instances where the process is started. And, you know, another thing that I particularly like about the policy is we have changed it to up to 3 community meetings. So if we're moving through the process and it's obvious that there is not significant support, then we don't have to continue all of those meetings, which I think is important. To your point, Mr. Susan, about the board's ability, if you look at the very first paragraph of the policy, it states, "The right to name schools, parts thereof, and other district facilities shall be reserved for the board.
Yep.
If the board does not name the facility, the following process will commence."
it
So I
kinda
think
says-
that
I
speaks
just
to
wanted
your,
Sometimes when you're doing legislation,
there is one area that I have questioned, and it just really is a procedural question, and that is that it suggests that it be brought in writing to the board in a board meeting. And I'm not sure what that process looks like. Ms. Hand, can you share kind of your vision there?
Yes, ma'am. My vision for that was simply a board agenda item.
Okay. So it would be submitted, so if say the PTA at XYZ school wishes, then they would contact us and request that an agenda item be added?
My assumption is that they would contact someone in our department, and we would prepare an agenda item, assuming that the documentation was correct. We would put that forward through the normal agenda process.
Okay. So I think maybe we need to clarify the language on that it be submitted to facilities for review and preparation for an agenda item, just because, like, I envision someone standing at the podium trying to hand us,
Okay.
you know, a letter that says, we want to
which we
do
would
this.
then have to wait for another board meeting anyway.
Right.
I would just say your deputy superintendent of
Mhm.
facility.
Take care of that. Thank you.
And I would suggest, and maybe, I don't know if Mr. Gibbs has access and is able to be listening with us today, but maybe just verify with him, to your point, Mr. Susan, that if we wanted to do a consideration of all schools, would that also fall within that first paragraph, that it is the board's right?
I think something was that drastic, right? This, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, like honestly, like all of a sudden we want to read policies.
And well, and it seems to me like it's our responsibility, but if we're not going to take that responsibility,
Here's what
then the
happens.
process has to
Right.
be completed. So,
No more than 3 cities come up. Sort it up.
I wonder if your concern about not being able to do more than 3 at a time is lessened because it's only going to take 6, not 8 months. I mean, I don't. Like,
I don't think we're
I know
gonna
that
run into
when
this.
the team, because
Yeah.
even if we don't have it like it was before, like it is currently, during that 6 months, I imagine they're still going to be doing that, like standing up the Google sites and having hosting the community meetings. It's still a lot of work, but it's in
Yeah.
a shortened time frame.
And are we going to add math? Because technically this is awesome. It's what really started. This originally, this whole process started there and then exacerbated by the Melbournes. That's all.
Ms. McDougall?
Yes. I think we're looking at apples and oranges. The mascot I think mascots have always been really at the school level. It's the students and the admin at the school who picks the mascot. I would not like to muddy the waters with this policy at all with a mascot. Because I'm not sure, Mr. Susan, if it really started with the mascot, I think they were two different things. We had the mascot that has been going on for years before Mel High. So I think they're two different things. I would hate to mix the two. I
Well,
think they're very different.
The applications were pretty close together. And I remember sitting there talking in there. The debate was that we needed a threshold to begin for the mascot changes. But if my other board members aren't entertaining the fact of trying to put it on there, then that's fine. I mean, you're going to put it out there as part of the process we're talking about.
Give me just 1 second. Let's look at.
Or this policy, property list.
Hmm.
Thing
Technically,
belongs
you're redoing your facilities properties when you redo your mascot. So technically, you could frame it over there.
If I remember correctly, I'm with Ms. McDougall. I feel like the majority of the board had a conversation about the fact that that was a school-based decision and a community-based decision and didn't want it to rise to the level of coming.
Well, it was a messy.
Absolutely.
It was a messy.
That's exactly what I was.
It was a messy process, and it tore around, and there
I
was no
don't think it was
threshold.
messy. I think that's subjective.
Oh, okay.
I can't get
think
a
the principal did
website.
a
I
great
can't
job.
even get our website to pull up. It's just spinning. Do we have a separate mascot policy, or did we not?
We do not have a
I can't
mascot
get to it.
policy. We left it up to the procedure that the school came up with.
That's right.
We don't actually have the word mascot in any policy.
Right.
I guess I would just like to focus on this policy and not muddy the waters to add anything about a mascot in this policy at all. Because it doesn't have anything to do with the building. It has more to do with the culture, really, in the school and the students.
Well,
All right.
and just, like I said, this policy falls under property policy, and I hear it say Susan, but I think,
Bless you.
it is mixing it up a little bit. But plus, the board has not, for example, in our last new school, which was Vieira Elementary, we didn't have any part of picking that mascot. The leadership there picked it, and, with prospective students and faculty.
All right, so if I can, I'm not hearing that we have support to include mascot in the policy, majority support. Is that correct? I think I did hear majority support for making it more than 3 years. Is that correct?
Or just leave it at that, and then what we can do is move it around if we need to. You know what I mean? I mean, if there's something that bad, then we just suspend the rules and go.
Ms. Belford, I do, before you kind of summarize there, I do want to make one comment about something that you said. You are absolutely correct. There is a school advisory committee, there's a PTA option, but again, those are voluntary, and they may not be representative of whoever is coming to the table with a suggestion. There could be an organization that has 100 members in it, or 50 members in it, or whatever. Again, just going to the SAC may not be an option either. So again, I want us to consider why we're setting such a high threshold just to start the process, when we just discussed as well, there is a process along the way now where if there isn't some kind of support, where the process can be halted and ceased. Again, we just passed a policy where we're going to be spending years on individual submissions.
So is there majority support for changing the 75% on those 3 letters?
I guess I'm curious on what would we change it to? That's my question. I mean, I don't have a problem with 75%, but I would like another suggestion of what would someone want to change it to.
Ms. Jenkins, would you like to offer a threshold?
No, I don't know. It's just a weird number to me. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't see the benefit of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. Again, I just can't understand why we're doing it for something like this, but we're not doing it for things that can literally cause culture wars and months and almost years of conversations about stuff, but we're doing it for this. It doesn't make any sense to me. And we restricted the amount of time how long this could even go on for. I just feel like we're restricting things for no reason. Just like I said for public.
Well, I mean, if someone wants to, I mean, someone can spend as much time as they want getting the community support, which they're going to need. I mean,
That's not what I'm talking about.
as a member of this school board, I would have a really hard time making a school name change without significant community support.
Nobody would be making a school name change without significant community support.
So
This is starting
if
the-
we're going to have to get, if that's going to be the impetus to help me make a decision as a school board member, because you said something a while ago that we don't own, the schools belong to the community. Absolutely. The schools belong to the community, and we are the representatives of the community. So in something like this, for me, it would have to be, like I said, significant community support. If a person who wants a name change can't even get to a couple hundred signatures to get us to consider it, then we're not going to get there. I doubt it. But if they can take all the time, they can have all the meetings, they can do whatever, but it's not a matter of they're not going to have the opportunity to speak it. They can speak it as many public places as they can find. They can stand on the street corners, they can stand outside the school or come to PTA meetings, they can come to SAC meetings, they can whatever. But it's the difference of, are you going to ask our staff to do that, or are we going to ask them to do it? All right, so they could, because if it's really going to happen, it's going to take some campaigning on their part, some communication on their part to make it happen, to get to the point where we're hearing from significant, in the example of Mel High, we heard significant input, the alumni over, dozens of years and all of that, it was significant. In the case of Duval County, it was significant for them from the get-go. And I think, Ms. Hannah, I saw in an email that you guys modeled some of this. Is that 75%, for example? Is that something that came out of their policy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, and it worked. It worked.
Okay, so I'm just going to state it one more time. We just passed a policy that will start. I understand we're not talking about that policy, but when you're using that as a support for this one, I'm going to say we just passed a policy that can very easily take the massive amount of time away from our staff as well.
I'm not using that as
But you just said it to me. So I'm going to say what I said again. We clearly do not agree. But you don't have to say it to me that way, because to me it's hypocritical and it doesn't make any sense. And that is the whole point of me saying this. It doesn't make any sense. They don't align. The concepts behind them don't align, and it makes me uncomfortable. I don't understand it. I wanted it on record that I disagree with restricting people coming to the table and saying they have a problem with the name. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. So I'm hearing that the primary area that is left open was the number of years at which it was taken off the table for a change. Ms. McDougall, you had requested 5. Ms. Campbell, you had requested 5. I am fine with 5. Is there anyone opposed to 5? Okay. Then I think I have, Tammy, if you could just make note for us to follow up with Mr. Gibbs when he's available. I have a question that we may need to address before we bring it back for board consideration, and that is just clarity on that first paragraph indicates naming of schools and not renaming of schools. So I just want to make sure that there's no conflict with later in the policy where it says renaming, that the board wouldn't have the flexibilities that Mr. Susan was concerned about. And I think that would address the issue of limiting to 3 at a time as well, if those are separate issues completely. All right, is there anything else on this policy?
Ms. Belford? Ms. Belford?
Yes, ma'am.
I did have one clarifying question for the
Yes.
board. When you all were discussing the ability to combine 3A, 3, 4, and 5, there's language in 5 that says community members within the school's attendance zone. I suspect that we would need to delete the within the school's attendance zone in order to bring alumni into that sort of
Good catch.
consolidation of the 75% threshold. So
Well,
I just wanted to check with the board.
But they could be alumni within the attendance zone and still be counted in.
Correct.
So if they were trying for alumni and they were trying for community support and they could only get to 25% of,
Correct.
then we could combine those numbers and consider them community, right? As long as they're within the attendance zone.
Right, but if they're alumni that are not in the attendance zone and neither of the 75% thresholds are met for either alumni on their own or the community members, then it would not meet the threshold. So that's
Good
why I wanted
catch.
to ask.
So it's almost, we either need to say, you know,
Well, that's just
potentially
not
add
an
a number
option.
6.
Well, it's not an option for that school to have. So,
Just leave it like,
like if school, if there's not enough, then there's just not enough. And if there's another vehicle,
I just,
I've never heard
I
of
wondered-
literally alumni from a school coming to the school saying we're going to change the name. So it's such a small, significant area that.
I don't
Okay.
understand why we're separate. Like, it should just be a community member.
Well, and I-
Because alumni would essentially be community members. They're part of the school community. They're alumni of the.
No,
in number 5, Ms. Hannah's pointing out that the way it's written is specific.
Right, if you take out the attendance zone.
But at the same time, do we want people who don't live in the attendance zone of the school but are in the community to have enough way to change the name of a school when everyone in the community may not be supportive? But I think
it's
that's
a good.
where we get
it's,
into dicey.
it's pretty solid all the way
So
through
maybe
when I
we should
read
just-
it. Yep.
I don't know if we clarified, like this is ever going to happen, but who knows? Mr. Susan made the point of if a name doesn't go through, but there's like a second place name,
You can choose it.
I just want to make sure that the way we've written it, that the 3 years, 5 years, that we don't make it that we can't immediately come back and pick a different name.
So my thought is that would fall within the broader purview of the board.
Okay,
So, but I'm
so
happy
we're
to.
good.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Ms. McDougall, you good?
I'm good.
All
I am
right.
good.
And Ms. Han, you're good? Thank you for that cut. Next is our board policy 8510, wellness. Do any board members wish to discuss this policy or make a suggestion forward?
I had a question. So the Neola on this one is extremely long, and there's all these options, and it looks like we picked the absolutely shortest that we could do, which is fine. I like short policies. Is there are we missing anything? I was trying to go through and there's, okay, because everything's in the wellness policy, we're good. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Just so you know, I didn't hear a single word.
Oh,
that
I don't
person
think
said.
your mic's on.
2, 3.
There you go.
All right. Where did I start? Okay, so we have the Wellness Policy and Procedures Annual Report that is done by the Wellness Committee and implemented by the School Advisory Health Committee yearly, and then submitted to the feds for food services. And this is done annually and kept up to date annually. So why put into policy something that's already being done and kept up to date on an annual basis? So we chose to use the categories from Neola, and then they said you could use, one or all of the following things. Well, all those things are in here, and we've gone through to make sure that every one is listed in here. So that's the reason we went that direction.
Good question.
Anybody else?
Did you bring this policy forward, your department?
Yeah, this policy was before was listed in the 3000s under staff. It was called Student and Staff Wellness.
Okay.
And so we decided to delete that out of 3000 and put it into 8000. So now it's 8510, which is connected with what Neola rep.
I think this is a very important policy, and I think before we approve it or move forward with it, we should ask Mr. Novelli if he will come back and head this wellness said initiative next year along with staff. I mean, I think that's appropriate since he brought it to us. He just admitted that he brought this to us, and we should.
We did already approve his retirement.
Yeah, but we can unapprove things. We are the school board. So, Dr. Mullins, would you like to weigh in on this at all? Would you like Dr. Novelli to come back and run our wellness? I mean, we have to ask the food and nutrition director in the back, of course.
I would be thrilled to invite Mr. Novelli to come back and be on staff at Brevard Public Schools, but I'm pretty sure that Florida retirement system would not agree with that, and Mr. Novelli would prefer to not sacrifice his retirement as a result. So we may have a hard, steep hill to climb to convince him to come back.
If he does it for free, though, he's allowed to come back, right?
Actually, we would still be advised that he should not be engaged with the school district, even in retirement, for at least 6 months, preferably a year, to ensure that his retirement is not compromised. Mr. Susan, no one appreciates your admirable attempt to keep Mr. Novelli part of the organization more than I, but
All right.
I got to look out for Mr. Novelli's financial
Thank you,
interest
Dr.
there.
Mullins. Appreciate that. I definitely need a 12-month sabbatical, but I will let you know I have renewed my teaching certificate.
Woohoo.
Congratulations.
I think that was a commitment to come back after 12 months.
And it's
I
on
heard
the
it, and
record.
we do
and
record
have
these
that,
meetings.
Make sure that's specifically in the minutes, please.
Yes.
Tammy.
So that's kind of a yes, right? Because usually I get a complete no, but we got a halfway yes that there might be a return somehow, right? That's awesome. All right.
Maybe
Well,
there's even a
Dr. Novelli, thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
contract position.
Kevin, thanks for bringing this
someplace.
forward. Thanks for doing a great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Novelli. All right, the last item on our agenda today is an update on our parent survey. Russ Brune, Chief Strategic Communications Officer, will present the information. Mr. Brune.
Good afternoon. Put it up.
Mr. Thornton, before you exit that door and while Mr. Brune is getting ready, can you tell me, are we doing food service this summer out of our schools?
Thank you.
I mean, I know that we're doing, like, for our summer school and for our camps and all of that stuff, but are we doing, like, drive-through pickup food?
Mr. Thornton, hold on. Would you mind grabbing a microphone just so we can
Sorry.
get you, make sure it's recorded? Thank you.
The community efforts that we did in the past are ending because of the waivers are ending as of the end of the school year, as the 26th of May. So the efforts that we are able to extend are feeding our summer sites, along with opening the doors there where they can come and eat at lunch because we're open food sites there. But their ability to come, get, and take home has ended because of the waivers have ended.
And do you know if we have additional, like, community supports coming in to fill that void anywhere? Are you aware of?
I'm not aware of that at this
Okay.
time.
Super.
Wouldn't we go back? I mean, because pre-pandemic, there were the summer lunch spots, but it is, if I'm understanding correctly, you actually have to go and eat it on site.
Correct. The
Okay.
food has to be consumed on site for them to be able to come and have lunch.
Is that limited to just students or students and siblings? Or?
Anyone 18 and under is eligible to come.
Super. Thank
And we'll
you.
be working on a press release with Russ in the very near future to getting all that information out.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Brune.
That's great. And by near future, that means tomorrow kind of thing, today or tomorrow, just so you know. Mr. Thornton, give me. Yes, thank you, sir. Before I get started, I just got to say one word, graduation. And Ms. Belford, congratulations. Ms. Campbell, congratulations. I saw your photos of you and your graduate in Titusville, and I got a front row seat as Ms. Campbell celebrated another child graduating in the rain, and it was beautiful. And my youngest is graduating VPK tomorrow. So that tells you where I am in this. And so I'm happy for you, maybe a little jealous. So so congratulations.
Thank you.
Don't rush it. Don't
Yeah.
rush it.
Mr. Brune, they only get more expensive. Enjoy the moment.
Yes.
The bigger the body, the bigger the attitudes.
So parent survey, in past years, elementary leading and learning led this charge, and government and community relations kind of really worked to engage our families to take the survey and to respond to the survey, and kind of the oversight really landed on leading and learning. And that was kind of handed off this year and kind of absorbed into GCR completely, which I was very excited about being able to kind of take this on, and we're proud of what we were able to accomplish. So a big thank you to Jane Klein and Jenny Gleason and Javon Blum from Elementary Leading and Learning for their help this year as we transitioned. I learned a lot, and my staff learned a lot, and so I'm very appreciative And the big thank you and the big responsibility for this goes to Caitlin Maffeo, who's right here. Caitlin, I got a chance to work with her, very lucky. She's our community engagement programs coordinator, and she's the one who kind of really ran point on this and kind of saw it through. So she took on this project, organized it, sent it out to each school. We got the best survey results in recent years, which we're always obviously happy about. Caitlin also is important when it comes to community engagement, working with our parent leadership team, which was relaunched in the second semester of this year, and we're looking forward to kind of making it more dynamic in the near future. So I want to make sure that that is on the record. Okay, so this year, the survey was sent out as normal, mostly focused on emailing our families. Paper copies were available for families that requested them. It was done in 2 languages, English and Spanish. The survey was open, as you can see, from February 23rd to March 20th when it closed. Total respondents for this one, 25,000 and change, and there were a total of 28 questions. We did add a few questions this year that weren't on it in years past. The survey is already being used. Each school has already received their individual survey results. That's being, part of their school improvement planning. They can use it for staff training and also their communication plans. Our Title I grant writers here at the district also have these results because they were facing deadlines, so we got the information to them. And the middle school results were used by Secondary Leading and Learning as they do a middle school project. So these survey results are already being used and being helpful as we kind of move forward. So I think that's important to know as well. A little bit of recent history. This is kind of a breakdown. This year, our goal was to get 24,000 respondents, and we beat that by over 1,000, so we're happy with that. Obviously, we want more, so next year is going to be higher. Last year, we had 22,129 respondents, and our goal was 22,000, so we barely got over that, which is good. And you can kind of see the previous 3 years where we were in the mid-teens, so a significant jump, and so we're happy with that. We know, as has been discussed here earlier, the importance of inviting our community to actually give us their opinions and have them be part of the process. And so we're excited that they've done that, and we want that to continue. Okay, I'm not going to bury the lead. All right, this is not the first question, but on the actual survey, but this is the big picture. So just let this settle. Let this sink in. Please rate your overall satisfaction with Brevard Public Schools. The green is satisfied, the blue is very satisfied. So if you add those together for elementary, it's 87%. 87%. We want 100%, obviously, but 87% are satisfied or very satisfied. Middle school, much the same. High school, much the same. The very dissatisfied and dissatisfied is roughly 8% to 11%. We have kind of a larger, neither satisfied, neither dissatisfied in there. So maybe that's a group you can kind of figure out more what they're thinking. But just on the record, when people think about Brevard Public Schools, they have a positive association to the work that the board does, the work that the superintendent does, the work that our staff does, the work that our teachers do. And this question, this answer kind of is that proof from 25,000 people. Do you feel welcome at your child's school? Yes. Elementary, 9 out of 10. Middle school, 86%. High school, 90%. The middle school does not equal 100%. I know that. I'm not a math major. That's why I got into communications. But there are questions on here that also ask for comments. And so people had a choice to just comment or actually answer yes or no. And so that's why there's a gap there. But for the most part, they feel welcome at their child's school. That's a good feeling. The office staff at my school is polite and is helpful in answering my questions and concerns. 80% in elementary say always. Middle school, 74% say always. High school, 71% say always. Then you add the sometimes in there, that numbers jump. Very rare will we have an answer to this question where they did not get a polite or helpful answer from our staff. customer service, that's one question that kind of gives you an insight to what's going on in our schools. Are you satisfied with the relationship and communication you currently have with your child's principal? And any parent who actually has a child in BPS knows that the principal is a lot of times the figurehead, the person you relate to as a parent, especially for the young kids. In elementary, 85% say we have a good relationship, a good communication back and forth with our principal. Middle school, it dips down to 67%, and high school down to 66%. A lot of that you can see is the written answer, why or why not. So that's 24%, roughly about a quarter of our respondents wrote an answer versus, and a lot of that is positive, a lot of that is negative. So it's both, it's not one or the other. So there's definitely room to improve there. And again, every school has their written responses as well as the actual percentages. Following this year's health and safety protocols, how often did you attend a parent meeting or event at your child's school that supported your child's academic success? That last part of this question is important. It's not about, sitting around and volunteering in classroom, which I saw yesterday, which was awesome at Meadow Lane. It's about looking at your child's academic success and that part of that. So elementary, you can see half of it was once or twice a year, 26% never. Middle school, you had roughly an even break, once or twice versus never. And in high school, about 48% for once or twice, and then 43% for never. I think as we get into next year, again, remember this was taken in February, March, when we were sort of still in the beginning of the second semester. Hopefully those numbers will the green will grow and the blue will kind of diminish a little bit. It's also a chance that maybe they didn't feel the need to go that can sometimes be a good news. Maybe they didn't feel a need to go into the school because everything was good. So every family has their own individual story. So the goal is to make sure that they feel comfortable about the support they're getting for their child's academic success. And so I think there's deeper numbers that schools can kind of get into to figure out, where do they need to improve. Which informational meetings and activities would you be most interested in attending? We broke this down. The next 3 slides will be elementary, middle, and then high school. And they can answer as many of these as apply to them. So for elementary, it was really about getting involved, family fun nights, volunteer opportunities, reading, math, so the academics were really there. I think you look down and 20% is pretty strong, the mental health resources, managing behavior at home. We know behavior is important to our classrooms, to our schools, and nobody is more aware of that than us and the superintendent about what we need to do to make sure that our kids are safe and they're behaved in the classroom. Same problem at home. And so they're looking to us, 20% are looking to us to help them manage behavior of their child at home. And these are the kids that they're sending to us. And so it is a partnership between the teacher and the parent. Which informational meetings and activities would you be interested in attending for middle school? No surprise to me, at least, transition to high school makes sense, right? You're trying to get them equipped for the next stage. They're also looking ahead to, the things that we try to preach when it comes to hardcore academics, the AP classes, the dual enrollment, again, volunteering, college entrance exam tests, graduation and promotion requirements, community service scored high. Nearly 1 in 3 people wanted to know about that. And again, family fun learning night, and Bright Futures financial aid options. So all pretty serious stuff, I would submit, is on the minds of our middle school parents. And you'll see more of that when it comes to high school. They're looking to the future, planning for what's next. You have, again, dual enrollment, graduation concerns. Focus support kind of lands for the first time on this with 22%. And volunteer opportunities are also there at 29%. Any questions at this point? Obviously, you guys can always jump in, but I just want to pause and see if there's any questions or thoughts at this point.
Yes, thank you. I like these. And I took all 3 of mine. Try to do it
Thank
every
you
year.
For that. I took mine too.
You've had a few of the school meetings with the parent meetings at the different schools. Do you think that input that you were getting back from those reflects, especially when this the kind of activities that people want, does that seem to be following a pattern?
Right, the meetings that you speak of, we really saw concentration on helping families help their children with homework. So you saw, ideas of, is there a homework academy for parents, which I can relate to. We also saw a lot of questions and concerns about mental health. What can I do to actually, lean in and take this seriously and help my child, whatever he or she's dealing with? How can I work with the school? And so there was really, that came out of that. And we saw that really the American Rescue Plan, when we had those public meetings several months ago, that came out as well, as far as how to use that money was, trying to get, shore up mental health, and also shore up, the ability to kind of help the child at home when he or she's doing homework or class project. So we saw that as well. Okay, this is a busy one, so we're going to just give it a second to be there. But how could your school assist you in playing a more active role in school decision making? So this kind of comes down to what is going on at the school level when they are making choices. So one of that is more information. About how the school is addressing any type of issue. That was big on all three of them. So you really see, that more information on how to become engaged was also, that's number 2 on all 3 school categories. And, convenient meeting times, more opportunity to share opinion. So this is good feedback on if we look at ourselves and say we are doing a good job of communicating. We may be doing that, but maybe we're not reaching the parents totally where they are. And so as a district, we want to figure out ways to make sure that those numbers increase as far as being satisfied with, knowing how to get involved. And I think the schools should look at that as well, because the message is only as good as it's actually received. And so I think this is, there's a lot here as far as looking at how can we encourage parents, what does that really mean? And with so much information out in the world, how do we kind of capture them for what's important? And so I think there's no easy answer to that. I don't think it's a bad, slide, but I think it gives us opportunity to grow and figure out ways to actually meet our families where they are.
Dr. Mullins and I just had a conversation about one of these today about the encouragement from the school to become engaged. That during during 2020, 21, we didn't really open up for volunteers until the spring with the mentor volunteers, and then this year, some schools have been slower than others, but now is the time for schools to be very clear on how parents can come, and community members, volunteers can come and get involved. Different schools handle it differently because some of them have the PTA and some of them don't. And usually if there's a PTA, that kind of handles all the volunteer things. And if your kid goes to a choice school, that also, kind of lays out. But if you're not in one of those entities, sometimes it's not as clear. What are the opportunities? Do you have opportunities for me if I'm, for example, a stay-at-home mom who has 2 littles that can't get childcare? Are there things I can do at home? And that's always been available at certain schools. So just ways for people to get involved on campus, off campus. I'm not saying we should tell every school, hey, here's your mandatory way, you've got to communicate it, but it definitely needs to be coming down from the top. We want our schools to create these opportunities. They need them, right? We have already said so many times how our media centers need volunteers to cover that we've had to cut that position of media assistant. Their perception still lingers that we don't want parents in schools, and that's not true, but we're going to have to be intentional about making sure that our community knows what the needs are and how people can get involved. I think that's really important, and it bears it out in the data that you have here.
They're great comments, Ms. Campbell, and I would add that sometimes we know that our teams have been overwhelmed with the myriad of challenges, and while help is good, sometimes coordinating that help becomes one more thing on the list when you're already feeling like you're drowning. And so Absolutely. I think we need to make sure that we are communicating those things. But the other thing that I would say is, if you are a parent who has time and energy and ability to even take on the communication and coordination role of volunteers in a school, for those schools that don't have PTAs or PTOs, putting together mentoring programs and helping to coordinate that. I think we get hung up maybe on doing things the way that we've always done them. And the truth of the matter is our schools need help even with coordinating the volunteers so they can take advantage of them. And so that would be my message to our community is please connect with the principal and, ask them what it is they need. And certainly we have district resources through our parent leadership team and to assist and give some structure, guidance, template type things to parents that want to take on more of a kind of a volunteer leadership role in our schools, because I think that would be incredibly beneficial as well.
Ms. Belford, if I may join in or chime in and just echo your reference to mentors in our schools. We've talked about, a significant need for adult mentors in our schools, and I know the board is aware, but Chris Moore and her team have been working on developing a district-wide mentoring plan for the entire district. We didn't have that before. And literally, I don't know, it was late last week or this week, Ms. Moore met with me and showed me we actually have launched our mentoring resource plan on our website. And it includes an online tutorial that an individual goes through to understand what does mentoring mean, what are the expectations, what is the purpose. It's more than just spending time with a student. It's really engaging at a deep level and talking about academics, talking about goal setting, talking about how to utilize and take advantage of the supports that are in the school, how to set up good habits for learning, and so on. So you didn't even have a chance to reveal it yet to the board. I will be presenting it to the community at large in the very near future, likely in a superintendent's report, but I'll give you a sneak preview or give our community a sneak preview now and use the opportunity to do a shout out to Chris and her team for getting that ready for our community, really to get ready for next year's school year launch.
That is awesome, Ms. Moore. Thank you so much. That has been like, that's.
Is it on the website yet? No. I can see it, but.
Good, because the first thing I did was get on the website and try to find it.
Very good.
Thank you so much for your work on that. That's super exciting. Sorry, Mr. Brune, we completely
No, this is all
hijacked
good.
your
This is all good.
presentation.
No, this is for you. How do you receive interim reports and report cards? Always a popular question. For elementary, you can see 41% use Focus, about 42% use paper copies. There are people who wrote in their opinions and then decide not to answer the actual multiple choice. Middle school, 67% use Focus, and high school is 58%. The rest are copies. One thing I do want to note is there was a big increase in Focus use for elementary. We had paper was at 67% last year, and it dropped down to 42%. So that's a good kind of change, I think, as we try to get access for our parents a little bit easier.
I would say that those red bars, I did not receive them, represent the kids who they're wadded up in the bottom of their backpack. No.
Well, you never know.
I'm in the red bar area.
Which is why we use Focus.
Right, that's why I use
Ms.
Focus.
Campbell, might that represent a student you know very well?
Yes, it represents a student I know very well. This is why I'm very thankful for Focus.
The next slide is how often do your child's teachers communicate with you about your child's progress? Elementary, it's if you combine the weekly and monthly, those top two bars, it's 66%. There's some that are doing it daily, and then you kind of see the communication between teacher and parent kind of change as you get to middle school and high school. I think part of that could be they have one or two teachers in elementary school, and then by the time I get to middle school, there's 6, 7, whatever. That may be the case, but you can kind of see there that there is high school, there's some teachers that never really talked or communicated with the child's parents. And I think that may have been a question that Ms. McDougall was asking a little bit about earlier, is, some parents may not necessarily expect that. And so I think as we kind of look at next year's questions and what we want to take out, what we want to add, and how we want to reword it, that's something we can look at is, doesn't look good, and maybe it's not, but maybe it's just, hey, if everybody's doing well, I don't need to know my son's algebra teacher. I don't know. Some parents do want to know that, some parents don't. So it's not necessarily trying to say good or bad, it's just information.
I think that's partially a progression of independence for students as well, right? We want the students taking on more responsibility as they get older, and so I think you're right. In a lot of instances, unless there's a problem, they're not communicating directly with teachers a lot of the time.
Right, and
Yeah, it kind of
as
flips.
we enter into schools where we have teachers that have sometimes 7, they've got 180 kids they got to take care of every day. So
Right,
it's not
yeah.
as easy for them to communicate.
Yeah.
Those communications may come, in the evening. That's not what we want.
Another thought that comes to mind is a parent may not view or receive focus updates as communication from teachers, but in some respects, it very essentially is, because those inputs have to happen. So, to your point, we may need to do a little bit deeper dive into that question to better decide or break it down.
Question is that is part of the lawn mowing and grass operations for volunteers and part of your plan here? Because I'm starting a lawnmower brigade that Dr. Mullins is going to join us with and mowing some of the grass as we come back in the event that Ms. Han needs some help at our schools. Is that part of this?
I have a very powerful lawnmower, and I can help, but I think our facility.
Not you, Brune. I don't need your mowing. You got to run the communications. Mullins can come hang out with me.
I
But
think facilities has it covered.
you think if we need it, I'll sign up. I've got some people. Mullins said he'd sign up. We're going to mow some grass. Ms. Han, is that okay?
On top of it, Mr. Susan.
Thank you,
There you
Ms.
go.
Han. I appreciate you dancing around that so delicately. I would like to use it as another opportunity to share with the board that Ms. Han has been extraordinarily resourceful, and we have actually, I believe, have we obtained contracted services to help?
Two board meetings.
Yeah, help with the lawn mowing going into the high cutting season, and we have prioritized keeping our schools looking great throughout the summer. So we're hoping to see marked improvement in some of the feedback we've received across the community in summers past, and I give Ms. Han all the credit for that. So, Mr. Susan, your neighborhood would appreciate it if you just keep your own lawn mowed.
I had to actually borrow yours.
Okay,
Thank you,
moving
Russ.
on.
Thank
The next question kind of gets, these are some newer items, but are you aware of the 4 choice elementary schools? We have 4 of them across the district. So 57% said yes and 43% said no. This is a good baseline to get as we look for ways, one, to have an awareness of the choice schools, not just elementary, but also engagement with our families to kind of apply, and what are those barriers. And so one of the most obvious barriers, if you don't know about it, you can't review it and see if you want to take part. And so one of my goals is to change that number so that more people know about it and understand what it is. It's also a dangerous dance because those schools don't have vacancies. And so it's unfair for us to say, come do this, and then we double the applications that we don't have the ability to put those people in there. But we're very proud of what those schools do and what it means, and so we wanted to kind of get that baseline of awareness.
But couldn't miss this opportunity as well, Mr. Brun.
I set you up, Southlake. Yeah.
I appreciate it. We are actually in the process of, have we procured a developer for Southlake? A designer for Southlake? Southlake is one of our choice schools in North Brevard, and very excited that due to the wait list and the response in North Brevard for our school of choice, we have prioritized adding a whole nother building to that school, which will provide additional seats at that school. In addition, West Melbourne School for Science has a significant wait list, and we're looking to expand additional grade levels at West Melbourne School for Science, launched in the near future.
And also something that the board and Dr. Mullen spent a lot of time on this spring, our career and technical education. So we asked, are you aware of the options available to your child, through BPS? And this is mostly focused on middle school and high school. And the answer is, you can see, 44% of middle school parents have an awareness. Of course, the bulk of our programs are in high school, not all of them. We all know middle school is where it's at now when it comes to CTE, and that also includes elementary schools. In high school, you have 57% awareness. And so I heard many times, Brevard's best kept secret, trying to end that. So we're still trying to do that, make sure people understand what it means, but also how they can take part in, if it's not their zone school, they can still take part in a program that they have an interest in.
Mr. Byrne, remind us again, when was the survey taken? Or sent to
It closed
parents?
March 20th. It started February 23rd. So we were starting we were about halfway.
You knew exactly where I was going. When did we launch our CTE tour initiative?
Well, technically, our first one was in December at Oak Valley,
that's right.
but then we kind of really got it going.
Concentrated
in January.
March,
Yeah.
February, March,
Yep.
April.
Mhm.
So may not have gotten the full benefit of that very significant informational and experiential campaign. So we'll hope to see some improvements. This one obviously hit hard because we put a lot of work into communicating to our community. Russ and his team have done a phenomenal job of not just hosting tours, but capturing the experience. We send the highlight video to the entire invitee list of, typically we send about 50 invitations to each tour. Less than half of those folks can participate, but they all get the highlight video afterwards. So use this as an opportunity to give shout out and kudos to Mr. Bruin and his team.
And then kind of one last question on this is, have you visited the open enrollment parental choice webpage? And you can see the breakdown there, about half and half. Middle school, almost exactly half. Elementary school, 41%, and high school, 44%. And again, that's just, we're kind of in that season, and so I'm interested in getting that information. And I think it's also interesting to me to see the user experience, because if you go, I think it was mentioned earlier, our website's pretty robust. And so we're looking at this as a baseline, but also looking at, okay, is the experience going to keep somebody kind of going through the application process if they want to kind of do open enrollment?
So, Mr. Bruin, I'm going to throw out kind of just a thought on that. I don't have any reason to go to the parental choice website unless I'm not happy with my school, right? If I'm happy with the school my child's attending and the things that are offered at that school, there's no reason for me to go to the parental choice website. And so I think to some extent that could be a good indication. The only thing that I would say is I think there's still opportunity for people to be educated about the great things going on at all of the schools, which I think we came a long way with you doing the school profiles and getting all of that information out there. I would think that might actually be a little more important than going to our school choice website. Because I think that, when people actually look at the programs that are available at the schools and understand, well, I might love my neighborhood school, but my child is really interested in medicine or, some specific thing, and maybe there's a path there if I'm thinking ahead. I think that really is more important than, because I don't think most people are looking for like EPOs, especially at the elementary level. They're just looking at, this is where my child is zoned to go, and that's where they're going, and we're happy there. And so I don't really need to go to the parental choice website because we're good wherever we are. But that doesn't mean that they're not missing an awareness of great opportunities that might exist. They just aren't thinking that they would want to go and explore those. Does that make sense?
Is if that number doesn't move, it's not necessarily as concerning. I get you. But I would like to see the numbers move on the previous slide of the awareness of the CTE
Yes.
things, definitely, because that's something that doesn't matter if you're at your own school or at an ELO or EPO school.
Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking, I don't know if this is where we're going with this, but you talked about a little while ago on another slide. It's not necessarily good or bad, a judgment, but it's just information. I think if we could have any tweaks to some of the questions or additions, it might be things like, are you satisfied with, what was it? How often your teacher is reaching out to you, right? Are you almost like, are you satisfied with the amount of communication? Because maybe your child is like on threat of death, is telling you, don't email my teacher in a high school because I'm going to handle it myself and you're going to embarrass me if you do that. In that case, I'm satisfied with the amount of communication I'm having with the teacher. But so there's almost that level, because it does change. I'm almost wondering with this, do we get this information, but we also say, are you finding the information that you need? Because that is where we can definitely, I don't know that we can improve on this, right? Because of the point that Ms. Belford made, maybe this is where it needs to be. But if people are going and they're not finding what they need, then we can improve on that. Does that make sense?
So I think this question, the data isn't necessarily helpful or important. I think the reflection of the question is the most important piece. And so I think something that we need to recognize is we are combating semantics and definitions of the word parental choice right now, especially with culture wars going on and all that. And we need to kind of understand that sometimes people probably don't really even understand what that really means. So someone might think that they have to be, like Ms. Belford said, dissatisfied with their school to understand that there is parental choice out there within Brevard Public Schools for you. And so I think this is just a good question for us to reflect upon how we're taking control of that word and its meaning, and how we have those choices and opportunities here in Brevard Public Schools.
Do you use the school or district website to find information about your child's education? You can see the breakdown, at least 2/3 say yes, and that's good. That's a pretty good number. Obviously, each school has their own website. I oversee, part of the district website, so I'm encouraged to see people coming to our website to get information about your child's education. And so this number has not changed in recent years. It's been very similar, so it's not like a big spike or whatever. But I think it kind of is encouraging that, and an important reminder for the district and each school that your website is used, and it needs to have accurate and updated information for your parents and your families and people who are moving here. And if you're not doing that, then you're making your family's lives a little bit more difficult. And so I think that's just a good reminder for all of us that it should be a priority. And then what is the best way for us to communicate important information? And this is very similar, same as last year, almost exactly. It's email and text messages. That's what they want. Focus for the older kids. Flyers in the backpack, still there. And after that, there was a considerable fall off. There was other options like phone calls and one-on-one parent-teacher conferences, but there was a significant fall off on the numbers. And so email and text messages are very, very popular still. Some school communities, they're really about phone calls as well, because they think that's where their parents get their most kind of the connection. So that's kind of where I think we would advise we kind of keep targeted on that. And that is one plug. If anybody goes to the Facebook page at Brevard Public Schools, you can see all of our CTE stuff. It's not a secret. I put it out there. It's there. So we talk about communicating with parents and families, and you send the message out. So we'll continue to try to find ways to get the important information out to our families. But Any questions, and thank you, but any questions or any other thoughts, please let me know.
I have a couple, but anyone else have anything before? So on the question about the website, I think it would be really interesting to add in maybe a separate question so that we can break down the information if they use their school's social media for updates. But I think it's important to see separately so we don't lump in social media and websites so we can see the
They are
value of both.
different,
And then a question that I would love to see on the survey, unless there's someone opposed, is are you aware of the mental health resources available to you and your family through your child's school? Because I hear repeatedly that, you know, we have a huge shortage of pediatric mental health resources in the community. Like if you're a parent who needs mental health support for your child, trying to get them in with a psychologist or a psychiatrist or sometimes even a counselor can be really difficult. But I know that we've worked really hard in the district to make sure that we have those resources available through our schools or connections through our schools. And I think a lot of our parents are unaware of that. And if we tie back to what we saw with our Youth Truth survey, our students are even unaware of the resources available in the schools, but certainly their parents are unaware. So I would really love to see if we could just do a little question on that to, if nothing else, raise awareness. And then it would be really cool, and I don't know how your survey tool is, but if perhaps on the survey tool, when we're asking these questions, if there was a link for them to click to get more information on, like on the CTE question, could they click a link and go straight to our CTE page? Or on the mental health question, could they click a link and go to the mental health resources? Or
And can we track how many people click?
yeah, I know that's getting super sophisticated and
Caitlin's
maybe
taking all
beyond
the
our
notes.
abilities.
She's my memory right now, so yeah, we definitely will, it's a great idea. Love it.
Yeah, where they
Like it.
could be like, oh, I'm curious, I didn't know that existed, but take them like right to that information so that there's follow-up.
I like, because some of those things are on the websites, but they're buried in click, 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 you know, how many clicks you have to get there.
That would be awesome.
Those-
Thank you. This is great info.
Ms. Belford, may I make just a couple additional comments? One, great conversation around our choice programs and, you know, the public-facing component of that and so on. But I want to use this as an opportunity just to remind the board, I know you're aware that in our strategic plan, academic excellence, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think it's objective 3, like strategy, objective 4, like strategy 4 or 5 in there. Leading and learning 1. I was in the right neighborhood. Hey,
love how
I'm
she's
impressed
keeping
how
it
well
low
my
for
team
you.
knows our strategic
Right?
plan. That's impressive right there. We have established a full design thinking process review of our choice program. The board knows our choice programs are probably upwards of 2 decades old in implementation, and we've not paused and stepped back and done a very holistic analysis, overview, deep dive into everything related to our choice programs, application, process, enrollment, all of those things, which is going to be part of our work, our task force into next year. So that's just met with Dr. Sullivan this morning, I think, about the procurement process of that initiative. So kind of a timely opportunity. Was that you? Okay.
Dr. Mullins, I think you need to take a little bit of a break.
Hey, we're moving full speed ahead. But I have just a couple reflections. If we go back to the first, I don't know, 4th slide, I believe, where, Mr. Brune, you reflect the survey participation over time. And we certainly saw a considerable increase from 2001 to this year, 2002. But I draw the board's attention to over the last 4 years, we have experienced a 67% increase in parental participation in our annual parental survey. And I would suggest and I would offer that, number one, Brevard Public Schools, this leadership takes parental voice very seriously. And that kind of improvement in just participation doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen by circumstance. It's from a dedicated, intentional, strategic drive to increase parental participation and giving them voice to their public school system. And second, I would offer that this suggests and demonstrates that parental engagement is on the rise. We talk about concerns that they're not as engaged, but we have to expand our perhaps biased definition of what parental engagement looks like, because today is much different than 10 years ago. The Focus app of students is the most comprehensive look into their child's academic performance and experience and homework and review guides and all of the resources our teachers work amazingly to make available. And the virtual extension that we've made available to our parents across our schools over the last couple of years, those are things we haven't put away as we move away from COVID and all of the restrictions. That's a new tool in our toolkit in engaging and interacting with our parents and families. So I'm very proud of the work that our government community relations team has done. They have certainly taken the charge to tackle the parent community engagement, awareness, involvement in our public schools very seriously, and we're proud to say we've made great strides. And we're going to keep up the hard work and love the feedback the board has already given us and the questions moving forward. Thank you.
A question, not super important, but I'm just curious, talking about numbers of respondents, but how many parents do we have total?
It's a moving target because they have to be registered, but it is over 100,000 that are part in our system. So it is, we have a lot of room to grow when it comes to getting everybody to take part.
But the other thing too, I would want everyone to reflect on too is, a lot of these responses are super positive, and it's still a huge turnout of respondents, which is rare. When you get surveys or reviews, they're typically, people will only do them when they have a grievance or something negative to say. So we should also celebrate.
Good observation. Very much on point.
While we have her in the room, I wanted to just add my kudos to Caitlin Maffeo, because I've already heard really great things about the relaunch of the parent leadership team, your leadership in that. And I got to sit in on one of those, I think one of the first or the second one back, and you're doing a great job. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Brune. But I've heard really great things, and I'm excited for how it's going to continue on in the next school year. So, yay!
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. You are much appreciated. Anyone else? Ms. McDougall, you good?
I am good. I really appreciate the survey and all the work that went into it. So thank you very much.
All right. Then do any board members have any questions or wish for discussion on anything else? All right. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.